This podcast contains topics of an adult nature and is not suitable for anyone under 18. Hey everyone, welcome to Unmasking Kink. I'm your host, Nova Monroe. Each week, I'll dive into the questions that you send in, doing the research and breaking it down into a way that's real, informative, and fun. You can find the podcast on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on social media for extras and updates. Just search for Unmasking Kink or Nova Monroe. You'll find me. Now let's dive in, and together we'll unmask what kink is all about. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Unmasking Kink. It's Nova, your host, and today we are getting into a topic that a lot of people in the kink community tiptoe around, but we're not going to do that here. We're going to talk about some boundaries, consent, and what belongs in public and what belongs in private, and why that distinction actually matters. Now, before anyone gets nervous, this is not an episode about judging people or shaming communities. It isn't about politics either. It's about respect. This is about the ethics of how we show up in the world and how important consent is at every single stage of life. Some things belong out loud and some things don't. And knowing the difference is a sign of maturity and safety, not restriction. And look, I'll say this right now because I know someone's already thinking it. Kink is not shameful. Kink is not dirty. Kink is not something to be embarrassed by. But kink is adult, private, and intimate. Kink requires trust and emotional awareness, and it's only ethical when everyone involved gives clear and informed yes. So in today's episode, we're going to unmask what it means to carry kink with responsibility. We're going to talk about public spaces, age-appropriate education, new 18-year-olds who are still babies trying to learn how to be adults, and what happens when expression crosses into consent violations. And yes, we're going to talk about exhibitionists because someone's going to ask. But before we go into all of that, let's have a tiny breather. Welcome to our little segment called The Curious Corner, a quick fun fact or a bit of trivia to give us something interesting to chew on. Did you know the word fetish comes from the Portuguese word feitiço, which meant charm or a magical object? Over time, it's shifted its meaning into something with special power or personal significance. And honestly, that tracks. If something lights you up or grounds you or comforts you or turns you on, of course it feels like it has power. But just like anything powerful, it needs to be handled with care. All right, let's dig in. Let's start with what kink actually is. Kink is not a fashion statement or a trend. Kink isn't just cat ears or collars. Kink is about communication, intimacy, consent, and exploration. It's between adults who know themselves well enough to express their needs and their boundaries. And kink isn't about shock value or attention, unless that's your kink, but that's a whole different episode for a different day. Kink's not a joke. It's not a personality you parade around to get reactions. It's about relationships. It's about trust. It's private by its very nature, which brings us to the heart of the matter: public etiquette and consent. Public spaces are shared spaces. Nobody in public has consented to be part of your dynamic, your scene, or your expression. Even if somebody argues that they have the right to express themselves, that doesn't automatically mean what they're doing is appropriate for public settings. And yes, some people argue that expressing themselves is their right. In most free countries, you can dress however you want, identify however you want, speak however you want. But that right is not unlimited. The second your expression forces other people into it, it stops being expression and becomes a consent issue. The law actually protects both sides. Your right to speak and express, and other people's right not to unwillingly be pulled into something they didn't choose. And that's where kink is different. Kink involves others by nature. It involves dynamic, it involves interaction, and it involves intimacy. So it cannot be ethical unless everyone present has agreed to be part of it. Kink in public requires consent always. And let's be honest for a second. If what you're doing is something that you would not want to show your grandma or someone else's grandma, then it probably doesn't belong in public because someone's grandma might actually be sitting right there. Public does not equal permission. This is something we talked about back in the Unmasking a Munch episode. A munch is a public kink meetup, but it stays discreet. You are not wearing fetish wear. You are not performing anything. You're just eating dinner like normal people and chatting. That's the difference between ethical public presence and inappropriate public display. Real kinksters know the distinction isn't shame, it's respect. Now let's talk about something that's been in the news. The Times recently ran a story about universities in the UK forming student kink clubs. Roleplay workshops, fetish discussions, events marketed to brand new 18-year-olds who are still trying to figure out laundry, let alone sexual identity. Here's my issue. Even when someone is technically an adult, the setting matters. A classroom or a student hall is not the same thing as a private, consenting environment. These freshmen are barely adults, and they don't know who they are yet. They're still emotionally under construction. There becomes a point when education stops being education and starts crossing into grooming. And grooming is not the same thing as teaching. Grooming is about exposure without readiness. Education is about empowerment. Those are not the same thing. Turning 18 doesn't automatically just give somebody emotional maturity. They need time to grow into themselves before being handed intense or advanced dynamics. Kink concepts or communities shouldn't be marketed towards them specifically or pushed on them. Exploration should always be self-led, not influenced. This ties directly into age-appropriate sex education. Teens in sex ed don't need detailed explanations of turn-ons. They don't need kink vocabulary. They don't need to learn about what they might like someday. They need to know how their body works, how pregnancy happens, how to prevent STDs, and what to do if something goes wrong. Turn-ons are personal. That's something you discover as an adult. Something that grows with experience and maturity and trust and autonomy. Curiosity is not the same thing as readiness. Just because a teen has a question doesn't mean they're ready for the answer, and the same goes for brand new adults. All right, let's hit the question that somebody will absolutely ask. What about exhibitionists? Isn't part of being seen their kink? How does that fit into the whole consent in public thing? Here's the truth. Ethical exhibitionists understand consent better than most people. They know the thrill is only fun when everyone around them wants to be involved. They use clubs, they use events, and they use spaces where the audience has opted in. Exhibitionism that forces strangers to participate isn't kink. It's inconsiderate, at least, and it hurts the entire community. Kink is not a rebellion. It's a responsibility. Now, let's go behind the mask, where I'm going to share a moment of my real life that ties into today's topic. Not too long ago, I was working karaoke night at a local bar. Our regulars were all there laughing. We were having a great time. It was a usual crowd. And out of nowhere, a very large group came in and turned the entire night into a drag show. No warning, no heads up. There was no option to say yes or no. And look, I've worked there. I've seen a lot. But this was not what people signed up for. The regulars were uncomfortable. Some left. I was uncomfortable. Not because of who was there, but because I didn't get a choice. I didn't get to decide whether I wanted to be part of something adult-themed that night. And that matters. Consent matters everywhere, not just in the bedroom. And here's the difference. Later on, a different event came through, and management thought that it might be controversial. So they pulled each of us to the side and said, hey, this is happening. Here's what to expect. Do you want to work that night, or would you like to Do you want to work that night, or would you like to switch shifts? Do you want to work that night, or would you like to switch shifts? That was consent and communication. That's what it looks like in a public space. Respect for your choice, respect for your boundaries, and respect for the people around you. Kink in public always requires consent. Freedom doesn't cancel responsibility. And part of that responsibility is remembering that public includes everyone, even the people who didn't agree to your scene. So, as we wrap up, let's take a breath and look at the big picture. Boundaries aren't about shame. Boundaries are about respect. Consent doesn't magically stop the moment you walk out of your house. Public doesn't mean permission, and being free to express yourself doesn't remove your responsibility to respect the people around you. True kink culture is built on consent, built on communication. It's built on understanding and respecting limits. This means we honor private things by keeping them private, and we honor public spaces by remembering that they belong to everyone. Expression is a right, but it's not unconditional. The moment your expression overrides someone else's boundaries, you've crossed into a violation, and none of us want to be those people. Consent belongs everywhere. And if we want to live in a consent-based world, we have to practice that in every space. Until next time, stay curious, my friends, and take care of one another. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, and leave a review. It helps others find the show. Got a question or an idea for a future topic? Submit it anytime at unmaskingkink.com. Feel free to share anything you think I missed or add your own take. I want to hear it. I'll be back next week with more curiosity, more conversation, and of course, more unmasking kink.